Does size matter? Okay, I'm talking about recording studios. So I obviously am not in my studio. I am currently in New Jersey, helping out an artist I work with on some music video things. And so while I'm here, I want to give you guys a peek behind the curtain at their own personal home studio.
Oh, what? You know, it's just, what, is it small? What, no, it's not the size, but it's small.
So jokes aside, obviously it's not a full service recording space, but it's built for a purpose, and that purpose is vocals. For songs that have lyrics, 99% of the time, those lyrics are the most important thing in the song, so they need to be recorded well. Matthew Smith, frontman for the band Foreign Republic, is someone who I've worked with for a very long time, before Foreign Republic was even a thing. A few years ago, when he was writing and recording his first few songs, making his way through his first album, he was recording vocals in his bedroom. It was not soundproof, it was not sound treated, and all the imperfections in the recording were very, very apparent once they had been compressed, double-tracked, EQ'd, and so on. We both knew that this could be better, so we put our heads together and thought through our options. There were things like this reflection filter from SE Electronics, but those can be a little bit unpredictable in fully untreated spaces. We could set up a dedicated area in his bedroom for recording vocals surrounded with absorptive material, or we could have his entire bedroom be the dedicated space, treating the entire room with absorption so we could minimize the reflections back into the microphone. So once we ran through everything, we realized that all of our choices that we had gone through had one major problem: privacy. Matthew doesn't live alone, and the occasional footsteps or barking of animals would spill into the recordings, and he didn't want people really listening in on what he was doing. Sometimes it's 2 in the morning when inspiration strikes, and it's easy to lose it if you don't act quick. And he's human, and you know, sometimes he gets embarrassed about performing for an audience that he can't see. And I totally relate to that. I'm sure that you do too. So after a bit of time, Matt landed on an inexpensive vinyl wood shed from Keeter, and he would treat it with acoustic panels, foam, and packing blankets. The main absorption was from these 2-inch thick panels from Prime Acoustic, and the foam and blankets were just generic sellers you saw on Amazon. So about a weekend and $1,500 later, he had this set up in his backyard, complete with electricity thanks to an extension cord running from his house. What I want to look at for you guys in this video is if that's worth it, building something similar for your own uses, or doing something like I did with my project studio, which we'll talk about in a second, or going out and renting time in a professional studio.
All right, so my studio, where'd my hair go? My studio is a little bit higher up in price and kind of the gear that it houses. It is a custom-built 12 by 24 shed from a local company in North Carolina. It is fully insulated. There's AC from a mini split that you can probably see. Not a terrible amount of sound comes in, and really no sound goes out. Its purpose is mostly for me to mix and master, but there also is plenty of space for recording real instruments. I've got guitars, bass, and a drum set up. I'm still kind of pondering if this space is enough for that, and I'm always experimenting almost every day with like what kind of sounds I can. I love the kit. It sounds really good. Anyway, this was well over 10 times the price of Matt's studio. Permits had to be pulled, an electrician had to be called, and it took a long time, but it's done and it works really well. So just focusing in on the difference between these two spaces before we get to the big studio, let's talk gear. So Matt's recording space is equipped with a Focusrite Solo 3rd gen interface and a AT4040 microphone. There's no fancy signal chain with boutique preamps or an LA2A. It's really simple, and if I'm honest, I envy that somewhat. It's as easy as recording can get, and I think that can sometimes help the creativity. So my studio, Swift Recordings, has a variety of microphones and preamps, but typically I'll start and stay with the 511 from Rupert Neve Designs and the MA201 from Mojave Audio. The mic sounds fantastic on nearly everything, and the 511 is unobtrusive, clean, and can add a little bit of extra high-end sparkle with the variable silk knob. So from the preamp, I go into the really nice compressor by FMR Audio. I've just done a full review of that, so if you are interested, go check that out. This doesn't impart a character to the recording, it's more or less a safety mechanism. It allows me a bit more wiggle room with the preamp so I don't like clip the converters or anything. Speaking of conversion, I run everything analog into an Antelope Orion Gen 4. Scream at me about Antelope bad all you want. It has not failed me, and I think it sounds really good. For guitar in my studio, I'll be using the UA pencil condensers, I forget what they're called, and I'll run those through the 511s as well. So we'll talk gear in the professional studio a bit later. For now, let's compare the two calibers of home studio side by side with their respective gear. Boo! Costume change. All right. It is now actually a few days later. It is also my birthday. Happy birthday, me. I just got done recording the stuff in my studio, and I want to preface some things before we take a listen. I am not a guitar player. I do not pretend to be one, so please excuse my piss poor guitar playing. And then also, this is just straight through the chain. I'll have the chains listed on screen. No additional mixing was done post recording.
I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I don't know why I live this life anymore. I don't know why I live this life anymore. Oh Lord, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I don't know why I live this life anymore. I don't know why I live this life anymore. Oh Lord, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I don't know why I live this life anymore. I don't know why I live this life anymore. Oh Lord, oh Lord.
Okay, so that was Matt's little studio vocal booth thing, and then my studio that I'm in. So maybe thinking, wow, that wasn't a fair comparison just in terms of the gear that was used. You know, the microphone is a bit more expensive. The preamps was just a Focusrite interface, and then, you know, outboard what's going on? My goal here is not to represent an apples to apples comparison. What I'm wanting to kind of convey is the kind of hardware that you would find in different calibers of studio. So for someone who isn't an engineer themselves and is just recording their own voice, a Scarlett Solo is probably the most popular thing on planet Earth for doing that. Then you have kind of the step up from that, I guess kind of the producer's studio. This isn't a giant facility, but it can house several people. And if you're going to pay me or someone in a similar spot, I know that my mindset is you're paying me money. I'm not gonna throw a SM58 in front of you and put it through a Scarlett Solo. My job, I feel like, is to listen to you and say, okay, this microphone suits your voice, and I have it. This preamp suits that microphone, suits your voice, so let's go there. I want to, and people in my position, I would hope, want to give you the best that we can for the caliber of our space. I am above a lot of people in terms of the kind of gear that they have in their studio, but I'm also below a lot of people in terms of that as well. But what's important is that I know what I'm doing, so you don't have to. I've been doing recording engineering and mixing for over 10 years. My ears and my tastes have become very refined, and I understand what sounds good objectively and what doesn't sound good objectively. There are artistic variabilities within that for sure, and just being a people person and navigating that and working with clients, that is 80% of the job. The other 20% is all the time I've spent learning this stuff. Rant over. With that being said, I want to kind of go over the differences that I heard in my space and without YouTube audio compression. That sounds like garbage. The vocals specifically, I feel, were the night and day difference. The majority of that has to do with the compression on the way in. There wasn't a lot. There was maybe 3 decibels happening at any given time. The tone of my voice was also captured differently. I did have the silk mode engaged, maybe 20%, not a lot. I don't really like it all that much for my voice in particular, but even with the red silk engaged, which adds a bit of harmonic distortion specifically to the high end, S and T sounds can get really out of control. But even with having the silk mode engaged, I feel like I'm not going to have to de-ess that a ton, which brings me to a point that I also want to make. I want to get off my chest. At the end of the day, are the differences negligible enough? Sure. Joe Schmo, who listens on a Spotify free account at, 128 kilobits per second, after it's mixed, fully produced, and mastered, does he know? Does he care? But I know, and I care, and the artist knows, hopefully to some degree, and they care because it's their art. Having all of this spec'd out gear is not me saying that a microphone into an interface into your DAW is inadequate. It's me streamlining the work that I have to do. I want to get the most finished sound possible on the way in so that I have to do less work later. And that comes from microphone choice. That comes from preamp choice. That comes from tracking with compression or not. What kind of compressor? Serial compression? Tracking with EQ? Which I don't typically do. Sometimes I will do that. Typically not on vocals. It's mostly on instruments that I do that. And also, if an artist requests something specifically, there's the ever so popular kind of hip-hop and pop vocal chain of the C800G into a Neve 1073 into a TubeTech CL1B. And, I've heard stories of like, oh, this artist came into the studio that didn't have that, so they left. If that's what the artist wants, even though I think there's really no need to go for all that, and I have that, or I'm at a studio that I can use that stuff, absolutely, dude. I mean, using that caliber of gear is immaculate. It's incredible. And it makes it's less work for me. So, I mean, yeah, great master comes from a great mix, comes from a great recording. And I've primarily been a mix engineer, but as I venture out and do more tracking, it has become ever so clear to me that getting your recording skills are second to none in priority. So with all that being said, let's blow all of this out of the water and go to an honest to God professional studio.
This is the 68 Sound in Greensboro, North Carolina. I just wrapped up a session in here today, but I did have some time to record those comparisons. So let's go back to my studio, listen to them, see how my studio compares.
First, let's talk gear. This is the Branch 2 by Tree Audio. It's a channel strip with some incredible features, and from the folks I've talked to that own one themselves, it is a desert island unit. Its tube preamp goes into a 2-band shelving EQ, which goes into an optical limiter, a la LA2A. With this guy, I'll be tracking vocals and guitar. The microphone is actually a custom design. I'm not entirely sure who makes it. If you recognize it, then please let me know, but its capsule, I believe, is from an Elam 251, so that already sounds like music to my ears. I'll be doing both vocals and guitar with it as well. Let's take a listen.
I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I don't know why I live this life anymore. I don't know why I live this life anymore. Oh Lord, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I'm taking the long way home again, oh Lord. I don't know why I live this life anymore. I don't know why I live this life anymore. Oh Lord, oh Lord.
So there we go. My project studio versus a real business studio. There is a pretty big difference in the components that were used. Let's just compare prices. The preamp and compressor that I used together was about $1,000. So the R&D 511 is about $700, $750. The RNC is less than $200. I think that combination is really cool. It's pretty clean, but it can get dirty and hairy if you want it to. The Branch 2 from Tree Audio, I'm seeing for anywhere from $2,245 to $2,900. That's a big jump. And as for microphone, that's a bit more tricky. So the MA201 that I use is going to be $850 new. And then let's just say that microphone was a 251. That's a $12,000 microphone, but it isn't exactly a 251. So let's look at like some kind of 251 clones. The Warm is $850, so the same price as my MA201. There's one from Golden Age, that's $2,000. There's another one from Golden Age that's $6,000. And I know that Universal Audio does one as well, their Bach line. I think that's about $6,000. There are more kind of boutique manufacturers. I think that's actually a good thing to compare it to. So let's see. I think Peluso does a version. Yeah, Peluso microphones, $2,100. So most ways you spin it, it's going to be at least double the price. The MA201 is a FET microphone. Any kind of 251 is going to be a tube mic. And the Branch is also a tube preamp. If I had to compare that sound to anything, it would be kind of the 610 with the LA2 in it. I forget what that's called. The LA610. It has, actually, now that I'm looking at it, quite similar controls, but I think the Branch is a bit more hi-fi. It definitely sounds a bit more modern and airy, and that is another point to make. There was a video I did recently, mix breakdown, and in that video I talked about how some setups have just kind of a super top end, like 18K and above, where that high end just isn't good, and I roll it off. The setup at the studio had that high end detail and graininess, but it didn't sound like garbage. It sounded really good and not only serviceable, not only usable, but I was captured enough by it to not immediately want to get rid of it. Now, there was some compression going on the Branch, but it didn't really sound like that. Compared to my RNC, that has a kind of middle-of-the-road attack with a pretty fast release, but any kind of optical compressor is going to be much slower. I think of it more like this, where kind of a quicker compressor is treating each word individually and keeping the syllables together, whereas a slower one, like an LA2A, is more or less making sure that the whole performance is together. And I also think that the setup at the studio had a bit less low end to it. This is probably just due to the microphone itself, but when going back and forth and comparing the two, there was a tiny bit more heft naturally in my setup. So I could say that Matthew's vocal booth shed is the best, go with that, do it yourself. I could say that a project studio like mine is the best, come pay me to do it. Or I could say that an honest-to-God recording studio is the best and go pay people like that. I know what I would choose, but I've been doing this for over 10 years, and most of the time when someone pays for studio time to record vocals or guitar, kind of singer-songwriter stuff, they're doing it because they don't know how to do it themselves. They're paying for the service so they don't have to do it for 10 years. I think it's definitely important to consider budget when doing this. If you have your own setup, your budget's going to be put towards getting the hardware and the software in the first place. If you're going to somebody else's studio, they've already taken care of all that. And in my space, for instance, I charge anywhere from $30 to $45 an hour with discounts for day rates. And a place like the 68 Sound, where the studio itself is a business, you're going to be paying for the room itself and then someone to work the room. If I were to engineer a session at the 68 Sound, I would have my hourly rate, but then also the studio managers and the owners would have their hourly rate or day rate, depending on what we're doing. And that's an agreement that's very common, and I've done that before at several different places, including the 68 Sound, and it's always a blast. It's always so super fun to be in a space like that that can facilitate absolutely anything that's necessary to the song, where it's all there, it's all hooked up, and everyone involved can just focus on making the best possible art that they know how. From my perspective, inside looking in, recording studios are not dead. They are necessary for a lot of different groups of people. You get what you pay for. And with an engineer that's worth their salt and a room that's really well built and maintained, what you pay for is nothing short of perfect. And then there are people like me, musician turned engineer. I did this in my bedroom for a long time, but now I'm more into helping other people. And if you're going to be paying me, I don't want you to just step into my bedroom. That's weird. So I'll have you here instead. But then there's folks like Matthew who prefer to have total control and do it themselves. And if you're like him, then a DIY project building a home studio may be the best option for you. But if you're at all intimidated or just don't want to be bothered with learning how to engineer yourself, then finding someone that you trust, who your artistic values align, and let them decide where you should go that can facilitate all the needs of your next project can enormously help your productions, your performances, and your final product. But there's another perspective on all of this. From outside looking in, the prices of interfaces and microphones have gone way down, and hit records have been made with just a Scarlett Solo and a laptop. And on one hand, that is fantastic. People who want to make their art but are limited by their budget don't have to pay top dollar for these places anymore. They can do it themselves in their bedroom. That has created a decline in the demand for bigger studios. But I think, in my opinion and in my experiences, there is absolutely a need for places like that. Maybe not for singer-songwriter stuff, but for things with full 4, 5, 6-piece bands, the space and the equipment and the knowledge and the love and the fun in the room can make or break that record. And it's more time efficient. There's a real Wurlitzer at the 68 Sound. It is so much fun and so much easier to just hit record and sit down and play that than it is to think, okay, do I want an Arturia plugin? Do I want a UA plugin? Do I want a stock Logic plugin? And I'm kind of frozen by the decisions, and my brain starts to wander more towards the engineering side rather than staying on the creative side. Please let me know what you think. Send me a message, write a comment. I'd love to do more things like this, especially kind of full band tracking with other people. Thank you so much for making it this far, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.